All right, let's jump right in with a fascinating idea. What if the laws for your marriage, your divorce, your inheritance, what if they weren't tied to where you live, but to who you are? Today, we're diving into a legal system where that's not just a hypothetical, it's real. The law literally follows you. So think about it. You pack up, you move to a brand new city, maybe even a different state. But the local rules for all those big life events, they just don't apply to you. Instead, you carry your old laws with you, kind of like a legal passport. It sounds pretty strange, doesn't it? I mean, it goes against everything we usually think about how law works. Well, that strange-sounding idea is exactly the principle at the very heart of India's system of personal law. It's not about geography at all. It's about your community, your identity. The law is literally attached to the person. So, to really wrap our heads around this, here's our plan. We're going to map out the legal schools, see what happens when you move, break down some key ideas like domicile versus residence, look at what happens when these personal laws collide, and then, of course, pull it all together with the key takeaway. Okay. First things first, let's talk about the foundation. You see, in India, personal law is not a one-size-fits-all deal, not even close. It's all organized into what are called schools, and these are basically tied to specific communities and religions. Let's take Hindu law as our first example. It's mostly broken down into two major schools, and this division is all about geography. You've got the Mitokshara school, which is pretty much the dominant one across most of India. But if you're from Bengal or the areas around it, you're probably governed by the Dayababa school. And believe me, this matters because these schools have different rules for really important stuff, especially inheritance. And this chart really shows you the contrast. While the Hindu schools are regional, like we just saw, Muslim personal law is based on religious sects. So for example, the majority of Sunni Muslims in India follow the Hanafi school, while most Shia Muslims follow the Ithana Ash'ari school. And then you have communities like Christians and Parsis who have a single uniform system no matter where you are in the country. It's a real mix. Okay, so that naturally leads to the big question, right? What happens when someone governed by one school moves into the territory of another? Well, let's look at the principle of migration. And this is the absolute key to the whole thing. Moving doesn't change your law. So if a Hindu family that's governed by the Dayapaga school in Bengal decides to move to, say, Mumbai, where the Mitokshara school is the norm, they are still governed by Dayapaga law. It just sticks with them. The only way it changes is if they actively choose to adopt the local laws and customs. This, of course, brings up another really important question. If your physical location doesn't decide your personal law, then what does? It's clearly not just about your mailing address. The answer, and it's a big one, lies in the legal concepts of domicile and residence. So let's start with domicile, because it is the key. The best way to think of it is like your permanent legal anchor. It's not where you're renting an apartment, it's the country or the legal system you fundamentally belong to. Everybody has one, and you can only have one at a time. This is the concept that officially connects you to a specific personal law system. And the law breaks it down into two main types. First, you've got your domicile of origin. This is the one you get at birth, usually based on your father's domicile. You can think of it as your legal factory setting. Then there's the domicile of choice. This is one that you, as an adult, can choose to acquire by moving to a new place with the very clear intention of making it your permanent home for good. Now, getting a domicile of choice isn't something you do by accident. It's a serious legal step, and it requires two things to happen at the exact same time. One, you have to actually live in the new place. That's the residence part. And two, you have to intend to live there permanently. You need both. Just living there isn't enough, and just wanting to live there isn't enough either. But, historically, this choice wasn't available to everyone. In fact, the famous British judge Lord Denning had a pretty brutal way of describing the old common law rule where a wife's domicile was just automatically the same as her husband's. He called it the last barbarous relic of wife's servitude. And while places like the UK have gotten rid of that rule, Indian law, for the most part, still follows that traditional principle. So during the course of a marriage, a wife's domicile is legally treated as being the same as her husband's. So, let's just make sure we're crystal clear on this. Domicile is your single, permanent legal home. It's your legal hometown that governs your personal status. Residence, on the other hand, is just where you happen to be living right now. You can have more than one residence. And that's what matters for more practical things, like which court has jurisdiction to hear a case. All right, now let's get into the really tricky stuff. The ultimate test case. What happens when these personal laws actually collide? especially when someone changes their religion and by doing so changes their personal law. A classic case that illustrates this is Kambata v. Kambata. Here's the story. A Scottish woman marries a Muslim man in Scotland. Then they move to India and the wife converts to Islam. After that, the husband divorces her using the Muslim practice of talaq. So the huge question for the court was which law applies here, Scottish law or Muslim law? And the court decided, yes, the divorce was valid. They said the law that mattered was the law of their matrimonial domicile after her conversion to Islam. But hold on, it's not always that cut and dry. Other courts have actually pushed back on this idea. They've ruled in some cases that one spouse can't just convert to a new religion and then force that new set of laws on the other spouse, particularly if they're trying to get out of the marriage. It just goes to show how incredibly tangled this area of the law can get. So, after all these complex cases, a few general rules have started to emerge. It basically boils down to this. If both spouses convert, simple enough. Their new personal law applies to both of them. But if only one spouse converts, they generally can't use their new law to seek something like a divorce against the spouse who didn't convert. And interestingly, under Hindu law, it's actually the other way around. If your spouse converts to a different religion, that alone can be grounds for you to seek a divorce. Okay, so we've looked at the legal schools, migration, the whole domicile thing, and even what happens with conversion. So what's the big picture here? What's the main takeaway from all of this? When you step back, what you really see is that personal law in India is like this incredibly complex and beautiful tapestry. It isn't defined by geography, not by state lines or city limits. It's a system that's woven together from the threads of someone's community, their family's history of migration, and their own personal identity. The law really, truly does follow the person.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really big question, one that's at the heart of a huge ongoing debate in India. If law is so deeply tied to personal identity, what does that mean for the idea of a single, uniform civil code for every single citizen? It's a question that forces us to think about the very nature of law and identity themselves. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.